Welcome to the Work Comp News and Views podcast, sponsored by Schlossberg and Umholtz, your go-to source for insights, strategies, and the latest updates in workers' compensation. Whether you're new to the field or a seasoned professional, we've got something for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and or leave a comment. And now it's time to sit back, relax, and enjoy the Work Comp News and Views podcast, sponsored by Schlossberg and Umholtz. And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural Work Comp News and Views podcast, sponsored by Schlossberg and Umholtz. My name is Stephen Appell. I'm a hearing representative with the firm, and I am so proud and privileged that both Jason, Jim, and everybody at the firm has their confidence in me to put this thing together. So without further ado, let's get right into it. I was fortunate enough to interview Brian Wapnick, the national representative of Court Call. As we all know, all of the conferences starting in March are going to be with Court Call at the Workers' Compensation Appeals Board, and all of us have questions, comments, and or concerns. So without further ado, here is my interview with Michael Wapnick of Court Call. And on the line with me right now is Mr. Michael Wapnick, the national representative for Workers' Compensation Court Call. Michael, thank you for coming on in. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Steve. I'm excited to be here and talk about the great work that we're going to start doing in California here in a couple months.
And I always figure it's good to start an interview with the beginning. So how long have you been with Court Call? What position did you start with? And how did you move up and advance yourself to the National Workers' Compensation Representative?
Sure. So I've been with Court Call since 2013, and my foray into workers' comp is actually a funny story. So those in California here may remember that pre-pandemic, Court Call had worked with the district offices in providing telephonic appearances. We initially received that approval on my very first day at Court Call. So I graduated from USC here in LA on a Friday. I started at Court Call the following Monday. And first thing in the morning, my boss took me to the Marina Del Rey district office. He dropped me off. He said, I want you to sit in the back of as many courtrooms as you can. This is going to be your primary focus at Court Call. So I sat there for about 4 hours, watched lunch, throughout lunch, came back in the afternoon, sat there. I did that about 3 days in a row until I kind of had a general understanding for the workflow and the work that was being done within the offices and kind of the things that we'd come up against in terms of implementing technology. And we've kind of run with it from there. And again, everyone will remember pre-pandemic, we were serving the boards here in California telephonically, and many of the states throughout the union pay close attention to what California is doing. So we've been able to use our track record here to implement our solution in other states. And I've kind of just continued to advance up through Court Call with a specific knowledge about workers' compensation, and have very much enjoyed learning the ins and outs and how the systems differ throughout the country.
Now, I know when the pandemic started and the Workers' Compensation Appeals Board was doing video conferences. For video, we used LifeSides. And then I guess recently the decision was made statewide to go to Court Call for video audio. Do you have any insights into why that decision was made to go from LifeSites to Court Call?
So I think, and I won't speak for the administrative team fully, but I think what they were really looking to do, and I've worked with Judge Levy, Judge Fudem, Judge Spitzer, Judge Durr, Director Parasoto and his team, as well as the IT team. What they were looking to do is really modernize and future-proof. So there's a lot of platforms that have become kind of commonplace throughout the pandemic from a technology standpoint. People use Zoom, Teams, WebEx, all of these platforms that we've become very familiar with. But I think what the division was really looking to do was implement a court system. And that's kind of where Court Call's bread and butter has been. It's a focus on replicating the workflow that judges are accustomed to, the functionality that attorneys and public participants need in order to have an outcome and a technological experience that's beneficial for the community. So rather than trying to shoehorn existing workflow into a platform, it's implement a platform that's built specifically for what we're doing here in the courtroom. So I think that's was the driving force for Judge Levy and her team, and we're excited to be a part of it.
And I'm definitely looking forward to it. Michael, can you possibly name a couple of things where court call is superior to life sites?
Sure. So right away, kind of the key component of our solution is it will integrate each judge's calendar into their virtual courtroom. So when a member of the public joins, so Steve, if you're joining a hearing in Judge Smith's courtroom, you'll be presented with an option when you join that says, what case or cases are you here for today? And you'll be able to look at a list that's pre-populated with all of those judges' hearings, and you'll say, I'm here for the Jones matter, the Smith matter, the John Doe matter, and you can make those selections, which essentially ties you into those cases. So a judge, when they're having their calendar, they're hearing their cases, they can start a case and only be presented with parties who are on that specific matter. So when they start a case, they'll see you on your end, the applicant attorney on the other end, without having to deal with 20 other people being able to disrupt or cause distractions to the hearing. Everyone else is able to observe as if they were sitting in the back of a hearing room. But really that key aspect of replicating how a case gets called, how participants appear to the judge is a critical first step. Beyond that, in terms of functionality in the meeting room itself, we have a robust feature suite of features handling documents and files. So you can share documents with the judge, you can evaluate them in real time. You can also collaborate on documents. So you could imagine a situation where maybe you're working on a pretrial conference statement with opposing counsel, and you want to add language, opposing counsel wants to add language, you're working through it together, you're seeing the edits that are being done in real time, and then ultimately when you come to a final document, you could then submit that back to the judge, and they're seeing the final annotated version. They can see the markups, they can see that you've collaborated and met and conferred, and really eliminating this need to scan, email, print, markup, scan, email, and kind of that mind-numbing process that can occur without a solution that's tailored for it. So the document features are pretty critical to making this solution work.
And I want to
well.
get to those document features in a little bit, but I'd like to back up a step or two. You mentioned about appearing on multiple hearings. So if I understand you correctly, court call allows someone like me, I'm a hearing rep with Schlossberg Umholtz, to appear on 2, 3, or 4 hearings at the same time. I know with the system we have now, for me to appear on 3 hearings, I literally have to have 3 phones if I want to appear simultaneously. Can you go into a little bit about appearing on multiple hearings on court call, please?
Sure. So there's a couple different ways. I think the situation that you're referring to is if you have hearings in different courtrooms with different judges.
Yes,
or
exactly.
different offices.
Yes.
So the system does allow for it. I caution to advertise it fully because it's difficult to be in 2 places at once, right? So if you're listening to a hearing and a judge is holding court, it really depends on the individual, I guess, how effectively you can listen to multiple hearings going on at the same time. From a technical standpoint, you could log into as many courtrooms simultaneously as you'd like. Because of the way our platform works, it's a browser-based application. You just open up a new tab or a new browser window with each individual courtroom. What I'm recommending, just having conversations with those in the field right now, is at least letting the judge know in those rooms saying, hi, Judge, this is Michael, just letting you know I'm also appearing in Judge XYZ's courtroom. So if I don't respond immediately or if I could be placed on second call, that would be fantastic. And at least giving kind of a cursory form of notice that they may not be there right away, that there should be moved to the end of the docket because there's a conflict and whatever it may be. But from a technical standpoint, you'll be able to log in as many times as you'd like in different courtrooms.
That sounds great. Now, you mentioned a moment ago about exchanging documents. Can you talk about whether or not the parties that are appearing, say in an MSC, when they exchange documents, can they do them privately, or is it with the judge? Or if you exchange a document with one, you're exchanging it with everybody that's present?
So you have the option as a attorney to share with just the judge, which obviously there's some concerns about. But then you also have the ability to share with those on your case and not the judge. So if you want to exchange documents privately with opposing counsel, or you have a employer representative there and you want to go through some documents, you essentially have a list of parties to choose from that you can click and select who you'd like to share them with. They can also be removed very quickly from the meeting if something was shared in error.
When it comes to the audio visual portion of court call, do we as a party appearing have the ability to either mute our audio or turn off our video?
Yes. So you maintain control of your audio and video. A couple of other things that we've built into the system to protect against hopefully uncommon scenarios where people may be abusing the audio or trying to hijack a meeting in terms of displaying things or being disruptive audio-wise. Judges and meeting hosts do maintain the ability to mute a participant's audio. So if somebody came in, and this is an outlandish hypothetical, and just screaming gibberish, a judge could mute that participant so they wouldn't be heard. And the same would be done with a video feed as well. So we want to maintain control and really focus on the decorum that makes a courtroom a courtroom. So you have the ability to do that. You maintain control of your own function as well. But just to reiterate, and going back through the workflow I mentioned a minute ago, when you join a meeting room, you're not to be seen and heard until the judge starts your case. So if you imagine maybe a superior courtroom, everyone's sitting there waiting for a judge to call the case, and then the judge will only see those who are present when they go to counsel table. So that's kind of the workflow that we've got working here. It's you're sitting there, you're able to see the judge, hear the judge. If they make preliminary announcements, you'll be able to see and hear the judge as he or she does that. But until your case gets started, you're not seen or heard by anybody, including the judge.
And as we're waiting, or let's say we go to first call, we enter our appearances, and for whatever reason the parties agree or the judge orders a second call, do we have the ability to stay on court call and go to, say, a separate conference room and the parties can talk outside of the judge's presence?
Yes. So each room, and if I didn't mention this before, each individual judge will have his or her own room available. Each room is being pre-outfitted with 16 available subconference rooms. So there's one currently for calendaring, there's one for information and assistance, and then there's 14 extra rooms that are available for private conversations between the parties. So
I'm sorry,
that
is for each WCAB or each judge's courtroom?
Each individual judge. So there's
amazing
215 rooms that we've created for the division, and each one has 16 available subconference rooms.
It
So
sounds
theoretically,
like
each
go
case could be speaking privately and discussing their matter and coming back in when they're ready, and the judge can move on with his or her docket without being disrupted by those private conversations. So you think back when we were all on the boards, these conversations would typically happen in a hallway or an empty courtroom, and we're really just trying to mimic that workflow electronically.
It sounds like you're not going to have a bandwidth problem. I mean, for example, we know that up north and in certain areas in the state, there may only be 3 to 5 judges. Down south, we could have anywhere from 15 to over 20 judges. It doesn't sound like there's going to be a bandwidth problem.
No, there won't be a bandwidth problem. And really where that factors in platforms like ours is concurrent video streams being shared. So you would imagine if everybody was on video at the same time in the Marina Del Rey office or Van Nuys, I know you're very familiar with both boards. You could imagine there being 40 or 50 participants sharing video, and that might cause bandwidth concern. The way that we've developed the system is that since only those who are on the given case that the judge is hearing are being shown, you're only going to have 2, 3, 4 parties, maybe a few more, but nothing to the extent that would cause any type of clog on bandwidth. I think maybe in Long Beach, where they're maybe doing asbestos calendars, we'll get a little bit more. But a typical calendar for the typical judge, we're not going to see any of those concerns regarding bandwidth within the court call standpoint.
And we're going to take a very short break right now. You're dialed in to Work Comp News and Views podcast, sponsored by Schlossberg and Umholtz. My name is Stephen Appell. I'm a hearing representative with the firm, and we're interviewing Michael Wapnick, the National Workers' Compensation Representative of Court Call. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and please do not forget to like, subscribe, and or share the podcast. Let's get back to our interview with Michael Wapnick, National Workers' Compensation Representative for Court Call. And of course, I'm speaking with Michael Wapnick, who is the National Workers' Compensation Representative for Court Call. Mike, thanks again very much for coming in. You've been doing a lot of training. I know you've been doing training with judges, and I think you're doing training with both applicant and defense attorneys. Is that correct?
Yes. So I've been very busy these past couple months. My primary focus, of course, is to get the judges trained up and ready to go. So I'm meeting individually with each office, either in person or virtually, to go through the platform and get the judges trained up. We're doing supplemental trainings as well, and then maybe even individual ones if a judge just wants a little bit more hand-holding. So we're making ourselves available to the judges. Beyond that, it's incumbent on Court Call as well to make sure that the bar is prepared for the transition. We know that this is a game changer, and it's a shift with how hearings have been going, how they've traditionally been conducted. So different organizations. I did a educational session with the CLA Workers' Comp section a couple weeks ago, in discussions right now with representatives from CAW, the Southern California branch of CAW, SCA, I believe it's called. CWCI, I've had talks with them, and really just trying to make sure that come March 3rd, which is when the platform goes live, that most of the lawyers or all of the lawyers throughout the state have at least seen the Court Call platform, participated in some type of educational session where they've seen it, understand how it's going to be implemented, what it looks like, what it feels like, and hopefully had an opportunity to touch it and play around with the capabilities. I'm a big believer that you do a better job of teaching by giving people an opportunity to get their own hands on a platform. And that's really what we're trying to do. So we're having internal discussions about propping up sandbox environments, me potentially holding office hours for any grouping of parties who want to come in and really see this platform ask these questions. That way, when we come March 3rd, everyone's ready to rock and roll.
Mike, it's no secret that in any field of law, judges talk about attorneys and attorneys talk about judges. Without saying any names, please, what do you find are the fundamental differences, if you've noticed any, between training the judges and training the attorneys?
Ooh.
Or is that too delicate a question for you? It's okay.
It's not too delicate. I'm just trying to think through it. I will say I'm about a third of the way done with the judicial trainings right now at the time of us conducting this interview. And I've been extremely pleased with how they've gone. The judges, I was a little worried that they'd be apprehensive about the technology, but by and large, the judges are excited. They can't wait to get their hands on the platform. and they've been very creative in terms of thinking through how this platform will better allow them to conduct their jobs and go through their calendars. While training the attorneys and having those conversations, it's primarily a focus on where this impacts their ability to practice, how it changes the fundamentals of their personal practice. But everyone, for the most part, has been pretty excited and understanding as to how this solution will benefit the community by and large. So I don't know if that's the gotcha answer. Maybe
it's good enough for me, Mike. Mike, can we answer court call? Pardon me. Can we access court call by both computer and phone? And will the screens look different?
So the platform is a fully browser-based application. So you don't need to download anything in order to access court call. All you need is the link that will be available on future notice of hearings, as well as available on the DWC site. But the screen will look different. Obviously, if you have a smaller real estate on an iPhone or an Android device, some of the buttons that may be present on the computer, you need to click somewhere to access them on the phone. But everything is done within the browser. So you'll click and you'll join if you're on an iPhone, Safari or Chrome or your browser of choice. But you will be able to see everything. You'll have access to the same functionality. Our preference is that you use the computer. It's just an easier thing to look at and digest. It also is a better indication that maybe you're in a stationary place and not, I don't know, in a car or any of the places that somebody could theoretically be while making an appearance from their cell phone. I'll also mention that you do have the ability to appear simply by phone on these matters. It's a little bit of a different workflow as you're not selecting your case, which I talked about before, but the judges are being trained on how to appropriately triage those parties and figure out what case they're there for, and then assign them out to the appropriate case.
So
you
Mike,
have the option to.
I was just going to say, so Mike, your understanding is there's no requirement for an applicant attorney or a defense attorney to have video on. They can appear by phone without video. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, and I'll just define a little bit more that by phone is kind of a vague term in this scenario. So when I use the term by phone, that's an audio only connection, and someone's just dialing in a phone number, similar to what you're doing now with the AT&T lines. When someone's connecting on a mobile device, they're still able to share video if they choose to do so, and they have those options available.
So it's perfect. Your understanding is it's perfectly acceptable to decorum to appear on court call by computer, but then have your video turned off, at least for a conference.
My understanding is that will be permitted by the judges. I would say that we'll probably learn in short order that some judges don't like the lack of reciprocity.
Yes.
That if my camera's on, your camera should be on as well. I want to make sure that you're in a place where you're able to conduct business, that you're dressed appropriately.
Yes.
That we have all of these different things. But you'll know as well as I that judges handle things a little bit differently, individual judges, and that we'll probably see some of those individual preferences come through in the way that they handle their virtual dockets.
And that brings up my next follow-up question, or the follow-up question. On a court call basis, from court call, is there any difference in the technology or what's going to be required between an applicant or a defense attorney appearing on a conference versus appearing at a trial?
From a technological standpoint, no. I do know that for the initial rollout here, we're primarily focused on the conferences. So the information that we're putting out right now is status conferences, MSCs, priority conferences, lien conferences, ratings MSCs as well. That information, court call will be primarily available for those. Lien trials and expedited hearings it's going to be up to the judges on how they want to go about handling those. The system is more than capable of handling those specific hearings. It's just up to the division as to how they want to implement and roll out, and probably even more so the individual judges on a comfort basis. Obviously, we have different requirements for trials and court reporters and potential for witnesses and all of these other things that come into play. But for the technology alone, there's no difference in what's required.
Mike, does the state of California currently have a long-term contract with Court Call? Do you know?
So I believe the contract right now is, I'd have to double check and get back to you.
No problem. What about a chat feature? If you don't want to talk, will individual parties be able to do written chat while they're in the courtroom?
So yes, the chat capability exists within the platform. Similar to some of the other things I mentioned before, we're really focused on maintaining control and allowing judges to manage these courtrooms effectively. So the chat feature exists, it's turned on, but there's not an ability for parties to create their own chat with non-hosts. So as an attorney, I would be able to send a chat to the meeting host, which would be the judge, and say, I'm in a different courtroom for 5 minutes, or can I get priority? Whatever you may want to say to them. That doesn't need to be verbalized. There's also a room chat that can be turned on, where general announcements may be posted, but attorneys won't be able to create their own chats with other participants on the meeting room. Judges have the ability to create those on their own, but we don't want a situation where maybe, I don't know, a witness is in the room and we don't want someone being able to send a chat directly to the witness. You could see countless situations where that may be inappropriate or illegal even. So we maintain pretty close control over the chat feature. It exists. Primarily where we see it being utilized is, again, for general announcements. And then also an ability from one of those sub-conferences we talked about earlier to send a note back to the judge and say, hey, judge, we're ready to continue our hearing. We've worked out our issues. We know the next date. And it allows for cross-conference chat as well. So you don't have to be in the same meeting room per se. You could be anywhere within the judge's virtual room and chat back and forth.
Thank you, Michael. Would you like to give any contact information, an email or whatnot, for anybody listening to this interview, how they can get a hold of you?
Sure. So my direct email address is Michael, Michael, as in Wapnick, at courtcall.com. And that's courtcall, COURTCALL.com. Again, I would say that most people who are in the industry will probably see me at one point or another if you're at any of the webinars coming up, or I'll be presenting at both of the educational conferences in March as well. And I look forward to seeing everybody there. And generally speaking, I'm just very excited to get started here and appreciative for the opportunity. We know that this is a big opportunity for advancement and modernization within the community, and it's not something that we take lightly, and we very much look forward to bringing the solution to the division and the public at large.
We've been speaking with Michael Wapnick, the National Workers' Compensation Representative for Court Call. Michael, thank you very much for coming on in to the podcast. And,
of course. Thank you, Steve.
And with that, we are done. Once again, much thanks to Court Call and Michael Wapnick, the National Workers' Compensation Representative. This is going to be interesting. And of course, don't forget to tune into our next podcast, Work Comp News and Views, sponsored by Schlossberg and Umholtz, where we will have news, views, and potentially interviews with topics that are of interest to the California workers' compensation community. Take care, everybody, and thank you very much for listening. You've been listening to the Work Comp News and Views podcast sponsored by Schlossberg and Umholtz. The opinions expressed on Work Comp News and Views are for entertainment purposes only and not to be considered legal advice. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and or leave a comment. Also, feel free to send an email directly to sappell@schlossberglaw.com. For Work Comp News and Views and Schlossberg and Umholtz, my name is Steve Appell, and thanks for listening.